My family has always been a sacred place for me. I grew up believing that family is the one place where I would always feel safe. All those shared meals, celebrations, and cozy evenings with conversations against the backdrop of old family photos created in me an image of family as something unconditional, stable, and supportive. My uncle, in particular, was one of those people I could always turn to for advice, someone I could share my worries or joys with, knowing that he would understand and support me. We often talked, sometimes seriously, sometimes just joking about the little things in life. I always felt that he wasn't just a relative, but a real friend. He was the one who knew how to support me in tough times and laugh together in moments of joy. His words always carried a sense of calm and confidence, and his advice often became decisive in my decisions. However, I never could have imagined that one day this very person would be the cause of one of the most painful and shocking moments of my life. It seems that we're never truly prepared for what sometimes happens, even in a family. It was like a thunderclap on a clear day, a moment when everything I knew and believed about my relationships with my relatives turned out to be different from what I had imagined. And what happened that day made me look at my family from a completely different angle. We all have our little or big issues in relationships with close ones. Maybe it's small misunderstandings, arguments over trivial things, or, as often happens, the lack of time for spending quality time together. But there always comes a point when these small things can turn into something much bigger. I realized this from my own experience when one day my uncle sent me a video that completely changed the way I perceived my family. I received a usual message on my phone which seemed completely unremarkable. It was just a video sharing app, and I was used to him occasionally sharing things from our family life. I didn't even think twice about what he might have sent this time. At first glance, it was just a regular video file which opens with a single tap. I pressed it, expecting to see another funny moment or a small family snippet. But what I saw was nothing close to what I had imagined. It was a home video seemingly filmed during a family gathering. I saw my parents, brothers, and sisters, as well as a few other relatives sitting around the table looking like they were having a typical family meeting. Everyone was talking, exchanging jokes and casual updates on family matters. I didn't pay much attention to the setting or atmosphere, like it just seemed like any other gathering. What changed everything was when the first words started to be spoken. At first, everything seemed pretty innocent. Someone was laughing, someone was discussing the latest family news. But then, other phrases began to emerge. They weren't just teasing remarks or witty comments. They were real blows, words I never expected to hear from my relatives. In the conversations, I started to hear mentions of me. I began to realize that all this was actually a discussion about my actions, my decisions in life, my place in the family. But what shocked me the most was that my relatives weren't just being negative. They were speaking with an obvious sense of animosity. More than that, I heard things I never imagined they could say about me, the people I had always considered my closest. "He'll never change," one of my sisters said. "He's the same biggest loser we've all known," my brother added. "We could really use him doing something useful with his life," my mom said. I sat there looking at my phone screen, not believing my eyes. I couldn't believe that these were the words of my own family. How did I end up in such a situation? I had no idea that I had disappointed them so much that they would look at me like this. But the worst part was that all of this sounded as though I was nothing more than a burden they wanted to get rid of. This wasn't just a misunderstanding or petty arguments. It was a display of real hostility, and hearing my family talk about me like this made my heart ache in a way nothing else ever had. The realization hit me like a ton of bricks. I sat frozen, staring at the screen of my phone, unable to process the words I had just heard. My family, Nakis, the very people I had trusted the most, the ones who were supposed to love and support me, were talking about me as if I were some sort of failure, a burden they could do without. My heart raced, my mind spun, and for a moment I felt like the ground had been pulled out from under me. I was no longer sure of where I stood in my own life, let alone in the eyes of my family. I couldn't understand what had gone wrong. How could they say these things about me? Had I done something to deserve this? Had I been so blind to the signals they had been giving me all this time? I replayed the video over and over, each time hoping that maybe I had misunderstood something, that perhaps I had missed some context or nuance that would make it all make sense. But every time the same hurtful words echoed in my ears, and every time it felt like the sting of betrayal cut deeper. What was worse was the realization that they weren't just venting their frustration about a particular situation. No, they were talking about me as a person, about my character, my choices, my very being. They were scrutinizing parts of me that I had always thought were either accepted or overlooked. There were mentions of my career choices, or lack thereof, my living situation, and even my relationships. It felt like everything I had done, everything I had strived for, had been reduced to nothing more than a series of failures in their eyes. The more I listened, the more I felt like I was looking at a version of myself that I didn't even recognize. They didn't see me for who I thought I was, for who I thought they saw me as. They saw someone who had failed, someone who was stuck, someone they no longer wanted to be a part of their lives. This wasn't just criticism, it was a judgment of my very existence, my worth. The kind of judgment that leaves no room for rebuttal or defense. The kind of judgment that feels like it erases everything good you thought you had. And then there was the crushing realization that I had never been told any of this directly. Sure, there had been hints, small comments here and there, that maybe I wasn't living up to expectations. I had overheard conversations or noticed disapproving glances when certain topics came up. But nothing had prepared me for the raw, unfiltered judgment I was hearing now. It was as if a wall had suddenly gone up between me and my family, a wall that I hadn't even seen being built. All these years, I thought we had an understanding, a bond of trust and love, but now I saw that perhaps that bond was nothing more than a fragile illusion. I could feel the tears starting to well up in my eyes, but I held them back, unwilling to show weakness. I was confused, angry, hurt, but most of all, I was stunned by the depth of what I was hearing. Why hadn't they said any of this to my face? Why did they feel the need to hide behind a video, behind closed doors, discussing me like I wasn't even there to defend myself? I wanted to scream, to confront them, but I didn't know where to start. I didn't know what to say or if I could even trust myself to speak without completely falling apart. I kept asking myself, what do I do now? Should I confront them? Should I let them know that I had heard everything they had said? Should I just ignore it and hope it all blows over? I didn't know what the right thing to do was, but one thing was certain. I could no longer look at my family the same way. The image I had of them, the image of a supportive, loving group of people who would always have my back, had been shattered, and now I had to figure out how to deal with the pieces. I thought back to all the times they had called me lazy or irresponsible in passing, but I had brushed it off as their way of trying to get me to do better. I thought about all those times I had stayed silent, not because I didn't have a response, but because I didn't want to rock the boat. I had always tried to be the good, obedient child, the one who didn't cause trouble. But now it seemed like nothing I had done, no matter how hard I tried, would ever be enough for them. I couldn't shake the feeling that I had somehow failed them, that I had disappointed them in ways I hadn't even realized. And the more I thought about it, the more I started to question everything. Had I ever really known them? Had I ever really been a part of their world? Or was I just an outsider trying desperately to fit in? The more I thought, the more the answers felt elusive. I had no idea who I was in their eyes anymore. The hardest part was knowing that I was just as much a part of the problem as they were. After all, I had chosen to avoid confrontation for years. I had allowed myself to be criticized and judged without ever speaking up, without ever standing up for myself. I had become the failure they saw me as, not because of any real shortcomings, but because I had internalized their judgments and allowed them to define me. Maybe I had let their words shape me, and maybe that was why it hurt so much. The pain wasn't just from hearing their criticism, it was from realizing that I had let them control my self-worth for so long. The feelings of guilt and inadequacy weighed heavily on me. But beneath that, there was also a deep anger building up inside. Anger at them for not being honest with me, anger at myself for letting things go on this way for so long. I didn't know if I should be more upset with my family for betraying me or with myself for allowing them to hurt me in this way. As the days passed, I found myself replaying that video in my mind over and over again. I couldn't get the words out of my head. I would lie awake at night, staring at the ceiling, wondering if I should just leave, disappear from the family dynamic completely. But as soon as the thought crossed my mind, I felt a pang of guilt. I didn't want to leave them. I didn't want to walk away from the people I had known my whole life. Despite everything, I still loved them. But how could I continue to love people who had torn me down like this? How could I continue to be a part of this family if they saw me as nothing more than a failure? I knew I had to confront them, but how? The fear of rejection, of hearing more hurtful words, paralyzed me. What if I was wrong about everything? What if they didn't even realize how much their words had hurt me? I thought back to all the times I had tried to have deep conversations with them about my life, only to have those conversations dismissed or ignored. Was it even worth it? Would they really listen now? The internal struggle was overwhelming. I felt trapped in this cycle of self-doubt and confusion, unable to find a way out. I began to question my place in the world, in my family, and in my own life. Who was I really? And how could I ever rebuild the relationship with my family after this? As I struggled with these questions, I found myself becoming more withdrawn. I avoided speaking to them, avoiding any situation where I might have to face them directly. Every time I saw them, I felt a sharp pang of resentment and confusion. How could they act normal around me when they had clearly decided that I was nothing more than a disappointment? How could they continue to treat me like nothing had happened when I was drowning in a sea of hurt and betrayal? I wanted answers. I wanted to understand why they felt this way, why they had never been honest with me. But deep down, I knew that even if I got those answers, it might not change anything. Once that wall had gone up, once that trust had been broken, could I ever really rebuild it? The days after I discovered the video were some of the most difficult I had ever endured. I had moments where I felt like I was suffocating under the weight of my emotions, and other times when I felt numb, detached from everything around me. I was still trying to make sense of it all, still trying to figure out what I was supposed to do. I didn't want to run away from the problem, but I also didn't know how to face it. I couldn't keep pretending that everything was fine when I knew that something had fundamentally shifted. The most difficult part was the silence. It was like the family had gone back to normal, as if nothing had happened. There were no awkward conversations, no attempts to address the video, nothing. It was as if they were all pretending it had never occurred. That silence was a constant reminder of what I had seen and heard. The problem was still there, lingering like a thick fog, but no one seemed willing to acknowledge it. I couldn't take it any longer. I was suffocating in this unresolved tension, and the weight of my feelings was becoming unbearable. I needed to confront them. I needed answers, but more than anything, I needed to know whether they cared, whether they saw me as a human being, or just as a failure to be discarded. It wasn't an easy decision. I had spent so many years trying to avoid confrontation, trying to keep the peace. Every time something bothered me, I would hold it in, thinking it wasn't worth the fight. But now I could no longer remain silent. The truth was, I couldn't go on pretending that everything was okay, pretending that I hadn't been wounded by their words. This wasn't just a trivial matter, it was about my sense of self, my dignity, and my relationship with them. I couldn't keep pretending to be okay when everything inside me was broken. So I made the decision to confront them. I wasn't sure how to begin. Should I approach one of them individually or confront the entire family at once? My mind raced with all the possibilities, each scenario more nerve-wracking than the last. I thought about talking to my uncle first, since he had sent me the video, and perhaps he could explain why he had shared it. But then I remembered how much I had trusted him, how much I had confided in him, and the thought of confronting him made my stomach turn. Would he even care? Or would he brush it off like it was just another insignificant thing? I decided to go for the direct approach. I called a family meeting. I didn't know if anyone would show up or if they would take me seriously, but I knew that I needed to express what I was feeling, even if it meant facing their anger or indifference. I couldn't keep pretending anymore. When the day arrived, I felt a mix of dread and determination. I was terrified of what might happen, terrified of how they would react, but I knew it was the only way forward. I sat in the living room, staring at the clock, waiting for them to arrive. Each minute felt like an hour, and I kept running over what I was going to say in my mind. I had no script, no perfect words. I just had the truth, and I hoped that would be enough. One by one, they trickled in, each of them walking into the room with the same casual demeanor they always had. My heart pounded in my chest, and I could feel the tension building up in my body. They had no idea what was about to happen. To them, this was just another family gathering. To me, it felt like the beginning of something that could change everything. Finally, everyone was there. My parents, my siblings, and my uncle, the one who had sent me the video. There was a brief silence before I spoke, and I could feel all their eyes on me. I tried to steady my breath, but my hands were shaking. "I need to talk to you all about something," I began, my voice shaky but determined. "Something that has been bothering me for a long time, and something that came to light recently." The room went silent. They all looked at me, waiting for me to continue. I could tell they were confused, unsure of where this conversation was going. But I couldn't hold back anymore. I had to say it. "I saw the video, the one you were talking about me in, and I need to know why you think it's okay to talk about me like that," I said, my voice growing stronger as I went on. Why was I not even considered enough to be told these things directly? Why did you feel the need to gossip about me behind my back? Like I wasn't even a part of this family. The words tumbled out of me like a floodgate had been opened. I had spent so long bottling up my feelings that it was impossible to stop now. There was a long pause after I finished speaking. My family looked at each other, exchanging glances, their expressions a mixture of shock, guilt, and confusion. I could tell they hadn't expected me to confront them like this, but I didn't care anymore. The truth was out, and I wasn't going to hide from it. Finally, my uncle spoke up. I I didn't think you'd ever see that," he said, his voice soft but filled with regret. "I didn't mean for it to hurt you. I don't know. I was venting. We all were." His words hung in the air, and I felt a wave of anger wash over me. "Venting?" I repeated. "That's how you justify it? By calling me the worst loser of your entire life?" "I didn't mean it like that," my uncle said, his voice trembling. "We were just frustrated. Things aren't going the way we hoped for you, and we were venting our frustrations. We never meant for you to hear that." "But you did," I said, trying to keep my emotions in check. "And now I have to deal with the aftermath of it. Do you realize how it feels to hear the people you love and trust call you a failure? A disappointment? Do you realize how much that hurts?" The room fell into an uncomfortable silence again. My parents didn't say anything at first. I could see the regret in their eyes, but it didn't feel like enough. Regret didn't change the fact that they had spoken those words, that they had betrayed me in such a deep way. I needed more than an apology. I needed to understand why they had ever thought that way, why they had never bothered to tell me how they truly felt. "I didn't want to hurt you," my mom finally said, breaking the silence. "But we've been worried about you. You've always been so unsure of yourself. We just wanted you to do better, to be better." "I know you want the best for me," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "But you've never really seen me. Not the way I am, not the way I've changed. All you've ever seen is what I'm not. And I'm tired of that. I'm tired of feeling like I'm never enough." The words came out before I could stop them, and the weight of them hit me hard. It was the truth, the raw, painful truth. And once it was out there, I knew there was no going back. The air in the room was thick with tension, each of us standing at the precipice of a conversation that could either heal the wounds or deepen them. The silence that followed my words was almost unbearable. I felt my heart racing, my pulse quickening as I waited for someone to respond. It was as though the entire family was holding their breath, unsure of how to proceed. In that moment, I realized that nothing would ever be the same again. No matter how this conversation ended, it would mark a turning point in my relationship with my family. The weight of their silence was crushing. For a long moment, no one spoke, no one even moved. It was as if we were all trying to process the magnitude of what had just been said. My uncle, the one who had started it all by sending the video, seemed to be the most affected. His face was pale, and I could see the regret written all over his features. But that didn't change the fact that he had been a part of this. He had been complicit in this betrayal, whether he had meant it in the way he had spoken or not. Finally, my father, who had been quiet until then, stood up. He cleared his throat, his voice unsteady as he spoke. "We didn't mean for things to go this far," he said. We have always worried about you. You've never been the same after you left for college, and we've seen you struggle, and it scares us. We've tried to help you, tried to get you to make better choices. But we've never really talked about it, have we? We just assumed you knew how we felt. Maybe we just don't know how to help you anymore." The words stung. I hadn't realized how much they had been harboring those fears. But it also felt like a weak excuse. They had never once come to me with their concerns in an open and honest way. They had kept everything to themselves, silently judging my choices and actions without ever giving me the chance to explain myself or share my struggles. Instead, they had chosen to whisper behind my back, to gossip about me when I wasn't there, to speak about me as though I wasn't even worth the conversation. "I don't know how to fix this," my mom added softly, her voice trembling. "But I can see now that we've done more harm than good. I didn't realize how much we were hurting you by not talking directly to you. I thought I was helping you by pushing you, but it was the wrong way to do it." Their words hit me like a hammer. I could hear the regret in their voices, but it was so difficult to take in. How could I ever trust them again? How could I ever look at them the same way when they had chosen to withhold their feelings from me for so long? It wasn't just about the video anymore, it was about the years of silence, of unspoken judgments and expectations. I had spent so much time trying to live up to their standards, trying to be the person they wanted me to be, that I had lost myself in the process. And now, here they were, apologizing, but it felt like too little, too late. "I've been doing my best," I said, my voice shaky but firm. "I've been trying to figure out who I am, to make decisions for myself. But it's been so hard when all I've ever gotten from you is criticism. You've never told me what you actually want from me, what you expect me to be. Instead, you've just torn me down when I didn't meet your standards. How can I ever live up to that? How can I be the person you want me to be when I don't even know what that person is anymore?" I felt tears begin to well up in my eyes, but I quickly blinked them back. I refused to cry in front of them. Not yet. Not until I had said everything I needed to say. I had to let them know how deeply their words had affected me, how much pain they had caused. I wasn't going to hold back anymore. There was a long pause. I could see that my family was processing everything I had said, but I wasn't sure if they fully understood. My father shifted uncomfortably, his face flushed, and he looked at my mother as though searching for some kind of reassurance. But I didn't want their excuses. I didn't want them to feel sorry for me. I wanted them to understand the depth of the hurt they had caused. "I didn't want to hurt you," my uncle said quietly, looking directly at me. "I know I've failed you in that regard. I should have never sent that video. I was wrong. But it's not just that. We've all been wrong. We should have been there for you in a way that actually mattered." His words were an attempt to make amends, but I wasn't sure if they were enough. Could an apology erase the pain of years of silent judgment? Could they take back the hours of worry I had spent wondering why they hadn't been more supportive, more understanding? Could they truly see me for who I was, or would they always see me through the lens of their expectations? "It's not just about the video," I said. my voice quieter now, but still carrying the weight of everything I was feeling. It's about all the times I've tried to be the person you wanted me to be and failed. It's about all the times I've tried to show you that I'm doing okay, that I'm finding my way, and all I've ever gotten back is disappointment. It's about the fact that I've never been able to be myself around you because I've been so afraid of failing you again. And I'm tired. I'm so tired of trying to be something I'm not. The room fell silent again. My uncle and parents looked at each other, and for the first time, I saw something resembling understanding in their eyes. It was the first time in a long while that they had truly seen me, not as the child they expected me to be, but as the adult I had become. It was a painful realization for all of us, but I could feel a shift beginning. This conversation wasn't going to solve everything, but it was a start. It was the beginning of breaking down the walls of silence that had defined our relationship for far too long. I don't know how to fix this, I said, my voice softening, but I need you to try. I need you to understand that I'm doing my best, even if it doesn't look the way you thought it would. I need you to accept me for who I am, not who you think I should be. There was a long pause, and then my father spoke again. His voice was quieter this time, more measured. We've been wrong. We see that now. We haven't been fair to you, and we're sorry for that. We'll try to do better, we promise. It wasn't a perfect resolution. It wasn't the closure I had hoped for. But in that moment, I felt a flicker of something I hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. Maybe we could work through this. Maybe, just maybe, we could start rebuilding the trust that had been broken. The days following the confrontation were strange. There was no immediate sense of relief or reconciliation. If anything, I felt more distant from my family than I had before. It wasn't because they hadn't tried to make amends, but because the damage had been done, and it wasn't something that could be undone with just a few words or apologies. The pain of betrayal, the feeling of being misunderstood for so long, didn't just disappear overnight. It lingered in the back of my mind, haunting me like a shadow I couldn't shake. But there was also something new, something that hadn't been there before, a sense of possibility, however faint. For the first time, I felt like my family was genuinely trying to understand me. It wasn't perfect. There were awkward silences, moments when I could tell they didn't quite know how to act around me anymore. But there was a sense of effort, of them trying to change the way they viewed me and, more importantly, the way they communicated with me. My uncle was the first one to reach out after our conversation. He texted me the next day a simple message that read, "I'm really sorry. Let's talk soon." It wasn't much, but it was something. I hadn't expected him to reach out so quickly. It was a step forward, a small but meaningful gesture. The apology had felt a little hollow during the confrontation, but this message showed that he was willing to follow through. So I decided to meet him to see if we could really talk through what had happened. We met at a cafe, just the two of us. The tension was palpable, but there was also a sense of mutual understanding, an unspoken agreement that we needed to be honest with each other. We ordered coffee, and for the first few minutes, neither of us knew what to say. The silence between us was heavy, but eventually my uncle broke it. "I messed up," he said quietly, his eyes meeting mine. "I never should have sent that video. I never should have talked about you like that, especially not behind your back. I don't expect you to forgive me right away, but I want you to know that I'm really sorry. I wasn't thinking. I was just venting because I was frustrated, and I didn't realize how much it would hurt you. I really value our relationship, and I don't want to lose it." His words were raw and sincere, and I could tell he meant them. It wasn't an easy apology to give, and I appreciated that he was being honest about his mistakes. But I couldn't just forgive him immediately. It wasn't about holding on to anger or resentment. It was about processing the pain. I needed time to heal. I needed to know that our relationship could be different from now on, that it could be built on honesty and respect, not assumptions and judgment. "I don't know if I can just forget about it," I said, my voice steady but reflective. "What you did really hurt me, and it wasn't just the video, it was everything that came before it. The way I've always felt like I'm not good enough no matter what I do. I've spent so much time trying to make you proud, trying to be the person you wanted me to be, that I lost myself. And that's not something I can just let go of overnight. I need to figure out who I am without trying to meet someone else's expectations, and that's going to take time. My uncle nodded, his expression one of understanding. I get it, he said softly. I do. I've always expected too much of you, and I'm sorry for that. I'll be here when you're ready to talk more, and if you need space, I'll give it to you. I just hope that we can start over. When I got home, my parents were waiting for me. I could tell that they were nervous about how things had gone with my uncle, but I didn't feel like talking right away. I needed some time to process everything. Instead of launching into another emotional conversation, I simply sat down with them in the living room, the three of us silently acknowledging the weight of the situation. After a long pause, I finally spoke. I talked to Uncle Tom, I said. He apologized. He's genuinely sorry. But I think it's going to take time. It's going to take time for me to trust again, to rebuild that relationship. I just need some space. My parents nodded, both of them looking at me with eyes full of empathy. It was clear that they were trying too, trying to understand what had gone wrong and how they could be better. But I wasn't ready to just let them off the hook. I wasn't ready to forgive them entirely. Not yet. I'm not going to pretend everything is okay, I continued, but I'm willing to work on it. I'm willing to try, but I need you to be patient with me. I need you to really listen to me from now on. And I need you to stop assuming that I'm failing just because things don't look the way you expect them to. My father took a deep breath. We've failed you in that way, he said. We've been so focused on our expectations of you that we've forgotten to support you as you are. I'm sorry. We will try to be better. My mom reached out, placing her hand on mine. I know we've hurt you, and I know we've been distant, but I want you to know that we love you, no matter what. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't an instant fix. But I could hear the sincerity in their voices, and I could feel that they were finally seeing me, not as a failure to be corrected, but as a person who was doing their best, even if they didn't always understand my path. For the first time in a long while, I felt like I could breathe. The process of rebuilding our relationship was far from over. It would take time, patience, and consistent effort from all of us. But for the first time in a long time, I could see the potential for change. It wasn't about erasing the hurt, but about learning to move forward in a healthier way. It was about breaking free from the expectations that had been placed on me and forging my own path, one step at a time. And while I wasn't ready to forget what had happened, I was willing to try. Because despite everything, I still loved them. And I wanted to believe that together we could rebuild the trust that had been broken, piece by piece. As the weeks passed after our confrontation, things didn't magically improve. The healing process was slow, and at times it felt like we were stuck in an endless loop of awkward conversations and half-hearted attempts at reconciling. There were moments of progress, sure, but they were often overshadowed by the lingering tension that still haunted our family dynamic. It was like we were all trying to find a way back to each other, but the path was unclear, and every step forward seemed to come with 2 steps back. The hardest part was the silence. It was no longer the kind of silence that suggested peace. It was the kind of silence that said everything was unresolved, that we were all still walking on eggshells, afraid to speak the truth in case it would shatter what little progress we had made. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was holding my breath, waiting for the other shoe to drop. There were times when I felt like I was on the verge of exploding with everything I still needed to say, but I couldn't quite find the right moment. And then, at other times, I simply didn't want to bring it up again. I was tired of talking about it. I spent more time away from the family in those weeks, trying to reclaim some sense of control over my life. I started spending more time with friends, going on hikes, and even getting back into hobbies I had long abandoned. It wasn't so much that I was trying to escape my family, it was that I needed space to breathe, to rediscover who I was without their judgments and expectations weighing me down. I needed to remember that I was more than just their opinions of me. And slowly, I started to feel like I was getting closer to that truth. But every time I returned home, The weight of the unresolved tension pressed down on me. The awkward conversations were never really about addressing the real issues. Instead, they were about tiptoeing around the hurt, avoiding the raw, uncomfortable truth of what had been said and done. My parents and uncle would make half-hearted attempts at small talk, and while they were always kind, I could feel the distance between us. It wasn't that they didn't care. It was just that we had all been so far apart for so long that it was hard to bridge the gap. Then one night, a breakthrough happened, and it came from the most unexpected place. I had just returned from a weekend trip with some friends, and as I walked into the house, I saw my dad sitting at the kitchen table looking unusually serious. My mom was beside him, and they both looked like they had been talking about something important. I could feel the tension immediately, but this time it wasn't suffocating. There was something different in the air, like they were finally ready to face the issues that had been hanging over us for so long. "Can we talk?" my dad asked, his voice softer than usual. "It's time we have a real conversation." My heart skipped a beat. I wasn't sure what to expect, but the fact that they were asking to talk, genuinely asking, was a step in the right direction. I sat down with them, bracing myself for whatever might come. "We've been thinking," my mom started, her voice tentative, "about everything that's happened and everything we've said to you, and we realize now that we've failed to be the parents you needed. We've been so focused on what we thought was best for you that we never stopped to listen to what you needed, what you were going through. We've been unfair, and we're really sorry." My dad nodded in agreement. "We pushed you too hard, and we never took the time to understand your struggles. I know we hurt you, and we didn't mean to. But we've realized that we can't just expect you to live up to some ideal version of what we want you to be. We need to accept you as you are, not as we think you should be." It was the apology I had been waiting for, but it wasn't easy to hear. The words were genuine, but there was a part of me that still wanted to scream. Where had they been all these years? Why had it taken so long for them to realize the impact of their actions? I wanted to say something, but the words caught in my throat. I wasn't ready to forgive them completely, not yet. Instead, I just nodded, trying to process what they were saying. I could see the regret in their eyes, the weight of their own realization pressing down on them. It was clear that they were finally seeing me, really seeing me, for the first time in a long while. And while that was comforting, it was also painful. It hurt to think of all the times I had tried to get their attention, to show them that I wasn't just a failure, that I was doing my best, but they hadn't noticed. And now, here they were, finally acknowledging their mistakes. "I don't know if I can just let everything go," I said, my voice quiet but firm. "It's going to take time for me to trust you again. I need to know that this isn't just another empty promise. I need to know that you're really going to change." My dad's face softened. "We understand. We don't expect things to change overnight, but we're willing to do whatever it takes. We're here for you, and we'll be patient. If you need space, we'll give it to you. But we want you to know that we're committed to making this right." It was the start of something new. I could feel the sincerity in their words, and while I wasn't ready to forgive them completely, I was willing to start the process of rebuilding. The truth was, I didn't know what that would look like, and I wasn't sure if I was strong enough to handle it. But one thing was certain: we were all trying. For the first time in a long time, we were all willing to put in the work. Over the next few months, things remained somewhat strained, but there were small moments of connection. Moments when we would talk openly about our feelings, when we would laugh together without any underlying tension. It was messy, imperfect, and awkward, but it was progress. The walls between us began to crumble slowly, piece by piece, and I began to feel like I wasn't just the person they expected me to be anymore. I was allowed to be myself, flawed, imperfect, and real. I knew the road ahead would be long, that there would be setbacks and moments when we'd slip back into old patterns. But for the first time in a long time, I felt like I wasn't alone in this journey. We were all trying to do better, and that gave me hope. And for the first time, I allowed myself to believe that maybe, just maybe, we could rebuild the trust that had been broken. One conversation at a time, The months that followed were full of small, delicate steps forward. They weren't grand gestures or life-altering moments. There were no sudden bursts of clarity or perfect resolutions. But what I began to realize was that healing wasn't about sweeping everything under the rug and pretending it hadn't happened. It was about acknowledging the pain, the mistakes, and the hurt that had accumulated over time, and making a conscious effort to move forward, even when it was difficult. It wasn't always easy. There were still days when the weight of what had been said and done felt like a heavy cloak draped over my shoulders, reminding me of the pain I had carried for so long. But there were also moments, fleeting but powerful, when I felt something like peace settling in. Small moments of connection with my family, moments where I wasn't just the person they wanted me to be, but the person I was. Moments where I could finally breathe without constantly feeling like I was under scrutiny. I had learned a lot about myself during this journey. I had learned how to stand up for myself, how to set boundaries, and how to be honest about my feelings. I had learned that it was okay to be imperfect, that I didn't have to live up to anyone else's expectations in order to be worthy of love or acceptance. I had learned that even the most difficult conversations could lead to growth, as long as I was willing to face them with openness and vulnerability. But perhaps the most important lesson I learned was the power of forgiveness, not just of others, but of myself. It wasn't easy to let go of the anger I had held for so long. It wasn't easy to accept that my family, the people who had shaped so much of who I was, had hurt me. But in order to move forward, I had to release the bitterness I had been holding on to. Forgiveness didn't mean forgetting. It didn't mean pretending that everything was fine. It simply meant accepting that we were all flawed, that we all made mistakes, and that we all had room to grow. As the summer turned into fall, I found myself spending more time with my family. The awkwardness had faded, replaced by a tentative sense of connection. My uncle, who had once seemed so distant, started showing up for family dinners again, and we found ourselves laughing together, reminiscing about old times. There were still moments when the past would creep into our conversations, but we didn't shy away from it anymore. We talked openly about our mistakes, our regrets, and our hopes for the future. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. One evening, I sat with my mom and dad in the living room. The house was quiet, the kind of quiet that comes after a long, busy day when everyone is finally settling into the comfort of just being together. My mom was reading a book, my dad was flipping through the newspaper, and I was curled up on the couch, staring out the window. I wasn't thinking about anything in particular, just reflecting on how far we had come. It was my dad who broke the silence. "I know we've said it before," he began, his voice soft, "but I just want to say it again. I'm proud of you. I'm proud of how you've handled all of this. It's not easy to open up, to let people in, especially when they've hurt you. But you've done it. You've allowed us to see you for who you are, and that's something I admire." His words hit me in a way I hadn't expected. I hadn't heard them in so long. Not because they didn't love me, but because they had always been so focused on what they thought I should be, that they hadn't taken the time to appreciate who I really was. And now, after all the pain and the growth, here they were, acknowledging it. It felt like the final piece of the puzzle had clicked into place. "Thank you," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "I don't think I've been proud of myself for a long time, but I'm starting to be." That evening as I went to bed, I felt a deep sense of peace. It wasn't a perfect peace. It wasn't the kind of peace that says everything is fixed and healed. But it was the kind of peace that comes from knowing you've done the hard work, from knowing that, despite the scars, you're stronger for it. I knew that this journey wasn't over, that I still had a lot of healing to do, and that my family and I still had a long way to go before we were truly whole again. But I also knew that we were on the right path. We were trying, and that was enough. In the end, the video my uncle had sent me, the one that had started all of this, had become a distant memory. It was still a painful part of my past, but it no longer defined me. What defined me now was the journey I had taken to get here, the lessons I had learned, and the strength I had found within myself. And what defined my family was their willingness to learn from their mistakes, to apologize, and to grow alongside me. As I reflected on everything that had happened, I realized something crucial. The hardest moments in life often lead to the most profound growth. The pain and the heartache that felt so unbearable at the time had been the catalyst for change, for a deeper understanding of myself and my family. And though the road ahead was still uncertain, I had hope. Hope that we could build something stronger, something more authentic, and something that would last. I had learned to embrace who I was, flaws and all. And in that, I had found the freedom to forgive, to move on, and to be at peace with myself and with my family.